Hi everybody, it's David from Doctors of Running, and today's coffee break is going to be a little bit different than some of the other ones we've had. We've had some special requests for me to make a video about breaking 15 in the 5K and how to do that, training that goes into it, and some of the bigger conversations regarding training principles, goals, executing them, and scaling things upward from a training standpoint. Before we get too caught up in this video, this is a coffee break, and I do want to give a shout out. This video is not brought to you by La Colombe Coffee from the local Costco. Flavor today is Mocha Draft Latte. So anytime we're looking into any kind of a race goal, time goal, anything at all, process goal, you just want to make sure that you take a look at it, make sure it's doable, make sure it's measurable, make sure it's something that's in your wheelhouse that you genuinely feel is reachable, something that you feel pretty good about that you can get there. It can be crazy, it could be far-fetched, but as long as you know what it takes to get there and have a vision for how you're going to get there. For today, I do have a basic outline. So we have a little outline here for a sub 15 5K. We've got training, outlook, goals, strategy, minimums. And looking at the goals, I already alluded to it a little bit, but in order to accomplish a goal or to strive for a goal, you have to know what is it that you actually have to reach. So if you say a sub 15 5K, you do have to know what comes with that. And so what pace is that, whether it's in kilometers or miles, and things like that. The bare minimums of, if I am to meet this goal, what do I have to do? And so for the minimums, I'm going to write some things down as we're going. So on a track for a 15 minutes in the 5K, 5 kilometers divided by 5, it's going to be 3 minutes per K. So you have to have at least 3 minutes per 1K. On the track, it's kind of nice because the math works out pretty evenly. 72.0 or 1 minute and 12 seconds is going to be per lap. That would also equal 15 minutes for the kilometers. So the other one, if you're doing this in 1600s, miles, I'm not exactly sure, just off of whatever the 1600 split is. But for 1600, you're looking at 448 through the mile, which ultimately would be 936 through the 2 mile. I'm not exactly sure what the 3 mile is. I don't really go through that math at that point. But these are the things that you're going to have to go through. So if we have a 3 minute K, 72.0 seconds on the lap, 112, 448, 1600, 936. I'm saying miles, but I'm acknowledging this is just shy of a mile, or just shy of the 2 miles. So 936 through 2 mile. For the full mile, if you're doing this on road 5K, probably give or take 450, just a couple seconds off of whatever that 1600 mark is. But knowing the minimums. So how do we get there? Looking at training, working on scaling it. I'm thankful that I have my coach, Terry Howell, that does help shape everything for me. It makes things a little bit easier to have someone that I can trust, build those foundational programs, and scale things upward, and I just follow along. I do know a lot of the training principles, and my background is in a lot of different kinds of training things with kinesiology, exercise science, strength and conditioning. I'm very familiar with setting goals and going after them, but it's nice to have someone there to help guide this process and to get feedback from and work with. So if you don't have a coach, it's always good to lay things down in the simple way first. See, what are the minimums? What do I have to do? And how am I going to get there? So if you're going to be able to run 12 and a half laps at 72 seconds per lap, you should be pretty comfortable at running 72s. The easiest way to hit a race time overall is almost always going to be to even split it. You're going to feel good through the first half. It's going to get a little bit harder, but you should be able to still maintain that pace, if not pick it up a little bit. That's always going to be the easiest way to go about a race. There are some times when you can get away with going out a little bit harder and you fall off. However, when things fall off, they usually fall off exponentially. So if you are to try and go a little bit ahead of the pace, just make sure it's something that you know, if in the event things do not go your way, you're not going exponentially the other direction either. So if we're talking 72s, well then maybe you're running 70, 71 and you hold it together just long enough, and maybe you have a couple 73, 74s off the back end, but not really anything higher. You shouldn't fall so far off to where you're really slogging out like high 70s or low 80s even in some of these races. When people die on the track, it doesn't usually go very well. Um, Same goes for the roads, making sure that you're just aware of that pace, what that pace feels like, and can you shift gears? Because sometimes it's easy to say, go run this time, keep running that time, you will achieve the goal in time. And as you get further and further into these races, the same split feels harder and harder. So getting used to running while you're tired, but also getting used to shifting gears, because hardly any race ever goes perfectly split. There will be variance in the pace as you go. The most recent 5K I did, I ran 14:46, and my first mile was 4:48. So there was a negative split race, give or take. I don't know what my exact splits were, but on my watch at least, which is going to be a little bit off because on a track and a watch GPS they don't always get along. But my watch had me at 4:48, 4:40, 4:36, and so gradually just chomping it down. If I remember correctly, I think the race went out in about 73, 74, and then we started kind of running 71s for a little bit, and then it averaged out to give or take 4:48 through the 1600, and then we kind of just started running like 70s, yeah, like 70, 71, maybe even a couple 69s in there, and just the whole field started ramping it up a little bit. And then the last mile, people started slowing up. You could tell everyone started hurting at that point. And so there's a very psychological switch there as well, as to everybody's going to start hurting. It's a matter of what are you going to do once you get there, and can you be strong enough to lean into it and really bring this race home, because that's usually where races fall apart, is when things start to get hard. And it will at any given point for anybody, whether they're an Olympic runner or a recreational runner. Things are going to get hard eventually, and no matter when you watch any race in a final, like people are going for it. They're not cruising. So just part of racing and strategy. But for race strategy, usually things are going to go much better for you if you even split things, or cut it down gradually. You can go ahead. Sometimes there's a time and place for that. I think it depends on where you are in your journey, and if you're really taking a swing at a big PR that you think is doable, um, sometimes it's the right move to just go for it. But in the process of getting faster, it's important to focus on the process. If you're focused on just getting faster and working on, okay, how can I inch this needle along? Sometimes it takes time and it's not always the most sexy. But what I tell people, especially on a 5K, 1 second per lap is 12 seconds per race. So you can make small adjustments and have big gains very quickly. It's just a matter of executing it well. The difference between a 14:48 is 71.0 on the lap, and 72.0 on the lap is 15 flat. That's 12 seconds. Or 14:47 point whatever, 0.5. So basically, I took it up from a higher end, cut it down, ended up averaging 70s for myself by the end, 70 high or whatever it is. But execution can be huge in these types of races, and you shouldn't feel like you're dying right off the bat in these races. The last thing you want to do is go out and have that feeling like this is going to be a long race. So making sure you stay within yourself and just scale things appropriately and stay subjectively ready for whatever you're going after. Training can be different for a lot of different people. I mean, you have high mileage, you have low mileage. Find something that works for you. I think the biggest thing with the 5K is it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of aerobic metabolism, but it's also anaerobic at the same time. And the pace you're running is never 100% comfortable per se. You are still running pretty fast from the gun. And so getting familiar with having that change in cadence, change in pace, and having to practice some strength and really doubling down in the second half of some of these races or workouts leading up to it. Getting familiar with that feeling, that's huge, because everyone is going to feel that at some point. So for me with the training, I was noticing that I could run the pace, but the aerobic and endurance and strength side of things was a little bit lacking. And so what we started working on was building that aerobic endurance. And that doesn't just happen with workouts and hard days, it's the easy days too. And if you can slow it down, make it easy, really focus on that aerobic metabolism. For me, I live near a bunch of hills, and so I basically would run easy through the hills, make sure I wasn't killing myself, but like keeping the effort, keeping it easy. I mean, but I was having to work a little bit differently, and my legs constantly got used to having different cadences and changes. And I never really bombed any of the downhills, just kept things smooth and fluid, and just keep building that aerobic base. And then on the track, working on a little bit of that speed, the pacing. So whether it's a 1K at 3 flat, or I think before the race, like 2 or 3 weeks before, we had 2400 with the first 1600 at 448. I think I came through in 446. And then the next two laps at 70, and I ended up hitting it just fine. And then a few 400s at like 68, which is just a little bit faster than 5K pace. And just getting used to kind of gradually picking up the pace if you have to. Getting used to surges, getting used to different kinds of changes. Everyone is going to have different training. Some people are going to be better off with higher mileage and having a much larger aerobic base. That's how they get it. Some people are going to have to focus on the recovery aspect a little bit more. They might not be able to handle higher volumes. I think some of that's going to be personalized and you're going to have to feel it out. For me, the sweet spot seems to be right around 70 miles a week for myself right now, but I've also been doing this a long time. This is something that I've trained up to and probably going to go up as we start working on the longer distances a little bit more. So outlook, I think it's also important too. Like, what do you want out of that race beyond just the race? Because it's important to have the PR and to work towards a race and things like that. But is your outlook making a conference championship? Is it making it out of in California for the high schools? It's CIF. Are you trying to get to CIF? Are you trying to advance out of your prelim, make your state meet? Are you trying to make the NCAA regional? Are you trying to qualify for a certain kind of race? Is this it? Is this your championship? How you view it and what do you want out of it? And so for me, the goal actually for this most recent 5K, it wasn't so much to go run a really hard 5K. That wasn't really the emphasis. The emphasis was to make the road racing easier. And so if we can make 440s feel somewhat comfortable and work on clicking that off, that'll make 515 feel a lot easier. And so big picture is working on the execution and doing things well. So that way we can have that patience and strength and carry it over to half marathon to marathon and just keep working on scaling it up. So I think having an outlook and a vision for what it is that you want and why you're doing it is very important. With that said, training in general, making sure that you have a little bit of work at race pace, make sure you know what that feels like. Probably a little bit of work a little bit faster than race pace, but at shorter intervals, and then also having longer aerobic type tempos and work like that that are off of race pace. So if my race pace was give or take, I think 443, I think 1600s. We were doing some tempos like 7-8 miles, kind of in and out tempos, but like by the end it was averaging maybe 520, something like that. So something that's aerobic that you are able to sustain and do, but not killing you at the same time, and you can get a real big aerobic workout out of it and then get used to picking up the speed while you're tired as well. So a lot of different kinds of fartlek style workouts where you're having floats where you're slowing down, but then you're picking it up and then you're close to race pace or just off of it. Then you slow it down, then you come back into it, stuff like that. So there's a lot of different ways to do things. I mean, then you can have your straight up mile repeats, you can have your 1Ks, you can have your 800s, 400s is a big one for a lot of people, just getting in rhythm, whether it's 12 by 400, 16 by 400, 10, or combinations. People will do ladders, 200s, 400s, 600s. There's a lot of different ways to do this, and so it's just working on getting familiar with the pace, knowing how to execute it, and getting ready for some variance within the race itself, because hardly any race is going to be perfectly paced. Even if there's a pacer, I feel like half the time they're up and down anyways. But that's today's coffee break. Hopefully that answers a lot of questions for people and training as a whole, regardless of the race distance, and knowing what you want to get out of it. So I'm going to enjoy this La Colombe, and y'all have a good day.